Everyone. This is the F6P NFL DFS Kickoff Show, hosted by yours truly, Keith Flemming. That's at Keith Flemming on Twitter/X. Joined as always by my brother and fellow DFS degenerate, Joseph the Brain Matz. That's at Joe E. Matz on Twitter/X. Joe, what's going on? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Just counting my winnings from the college football playoff because all my bets hit on that one. So,
all right.
Thank you to those teams for barely pulling that out in both games.
Hey, I told you, obviously I can say this as a Georgia fan now that they weren't involved, but it is cool to see some new blood in the championship. And I really think Washington's going to win, but we'll see. Sadly, this is week 18 of DFS. That does not mean that we are done. We will be covering the wild cards, divisionals, conference, Super Bowl. Again, we are degenerates and we love DFS. So we'll probably change up the format a little bit. We give 2 plays each week, 6,900 and below. Probably the divisional and wild card round, we'll just give our favorite plays in general. And then I think what we've done for the conference championship and Super Bowl and previous years is kind of do basically a lineup or two. So we will continue to do that. Week 18, one of the harder weeks of the season. I would say only week 1, right? It's probably tougher, Joe.
Shoot. I mean,
you know nothing week 1. You know nothing.
That's true. It's a toss-up between the two because, at least week 1, everyone's playing, but then sometimes, you drafted, who was it, Trey Mason to be the Niners running back, and then he's the third string for his entire career. So,
you're all in on Cam
Week 1
Akers
edges out week 18.
And Kyron Williams rushes for 100 yards, which you just got used to.
Exactly.
So before we get into these plays, I want to real quickly, because I think it's extremely important this week. Number 1, I don't trust any team that has nothing to play for, particularly those that are in the postseason. Those teams, Ravens, Browns, Chiefs, Niners, they have nothing to play for. They can't improve their standing at all.
I think the key thing there is have something to play for this season, but not this week.
Correct.
Because the team, if you have like a 6-9 team playing, or I guess 6-10 team now, playing a 7-9 team, you could probably assume if they're healthy, they will play. Whereas, if the Eagles look at the score going into the fourth quarter of the Dallas-Washington game and Dallas is up by 27, they might just pull everyone off. And Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Swift, all those guys just head to the bench, and now you're screwed.
Yes. And so in a smaller group, a little bigger group, but again, don't really trust these teams either because they're in the playoffs, but they technically have something to play for. Cowboys, Lions, Rams, Dolphins, Eagles. We've already seen Cooper Kupp has been ruled out. Who knows? Who knows how much the 49ers are going to play? Again, these are teams that I would try to avoid if you can. The teams that I really like, because there's 11 of them, must-win teams. They would need to win, and therefore these teams, in my opinion, are the highest priority. Falcons, well, not the Falcons, but after the Falcons, Bills, Packers, Texans, Colts, Jaguars, Vikings, Saints, Steelers, Seahawks, Bucks. And then there's a group of eliminated, which again, just be careful with the eliminated teams too. Who knows their motivation? We were talking beforehand. I have 3 teams that I think you can say are definitely motivated to win. Number 1, the Bears, right? Justin Fields playing for QB, coach, trying to get an extension. I think they want to beat the Packers. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Well, especially, that is the one great thing about the way that everything is scheduled is you're also playing a division rival.
Yep.
So, unless you have good reason to not be trying to send all your best guys out there, you want to win this game. Because, if you're a Bears player or coach, obviously, even fan, because especially, I guess, fan this year because they have the Panthers pick anyway, you want to win this game. You always want to beat Green Bay.
All right, the other two teams I have are the Raiders, because Antonio Pierce, again,
Yes,
fighting for his
100%.
job. Seems like the Raiders are rallying behind him. They want him to be the coach. And then your Giants, because y'all hate the Eagles. I know they hate you. You haven't beat them, but like once and forever.
Yeah,
So,
it's
and
been
not to
rough.
mention, again, you could mess up their party potentially, depending on what
It
happens.
would be hilarious on multiple levels, both as a joke on Philadelphia and as a joke on us.
Because your draft
If
savvy.
Washington pulled the upset and then we won, so we did not jump Washington in the draft, and the Eagles did not get the 1 seed or the division win, even with the Cowboys losing, that would be the funniest thing that could possibly happen.
I love it. So again, just be careful this week. That was why we wanted to go through that little exercise real quick. I do think it's important for players and your picks to have something to actually play for. You just have a little better idea of how much they're going to play. All right, QBs this week. Joe, very similar to last week, which boy did we kill it last week. Well, last week was like we're heating up, of course, right as the season ends. Going nuclear. I love that. It's always the way it always is. But I think this is a value week. I don't even have a median play. There was a couple of guys I was going to give. I really do like Justin Fields this week. Again, he's playing for his job, scored all his points in the last couple of games. We can't pick him because it's 6,900 and below. So I'm going to go with two guys under 5,400. I'm going to start with Tyrod Taylor. We'll call him my median. He's really not. 5,300 versus Philly. It was one of my best plays last week. If you listened to me and played the Taylor Slayton stack, you're welcome. That was very, very bountiful. He scored 22.8 points. His second game this season that he started, he scored 20-plus points on DK, facing a Philly team that we know he scored 10.4 points in just one half. What I like is he ran for 21 yards in that one half against the Eagles. He ran for 40 last week. So he ran for like 30 against the Washington. You can count for about 3-4 points just from the rushing. And Philly's secondary is bad. I mean, again, if you need evidence, that Darius Slayton 75-yard touchdown. So I love Tyrod Taylor, 5,300. There is one guy that I actually like a little bit more because he's a few hundred cheaper, but I don't think you can, go wrong with any QB versus Philadelphia right now, especially one that runs the ball.
Yeah, I love Tyrod this week as well. He is my bargain play again for, I guess, what is this, the third straight week? Because we're just, why steer away coming off of a 23-point game against the Rams? And then obviously, I guess we didn't play him against the Eagles because he came in at halftime. But if we could have just played a guy for a half, Tyrod would have been on the list that week too. But yeah, came in cold against the Eagles, put up 10.5. 20 last week, keep it rolling, and you'll get to, I assume, the other guys here because I think you're right. There is one matchup, though, that I like in the more traditional mid-tier, and that's Seahawks-Cardinals, where, Kyler Murray, again, someone who has a lot to play for. He wants to obviously, he probably already pulled it off by winning last week and dropping the Cardinals a few spots in the draft. But winning again this week would guarantee, I think, 100%. They're not taking a QB in this draft. Even if somebody falls, if they win, they're coming on back-to-back wins over Philadelphia, who's obviously going to the playoffs.
The Cowboys are this year. I mean, Arizona's kind of frisky.
Yeah, and then Tyrod, especially the last 2 weeks, 5 touchdowns to only 1 pick, back-to-back 20-point games. Now, obviously, the Eagles are kind of a defense in free fall. But the other game that he did that was against the Bears. They only scored 16 points in that game. But again, he threw for 230, 2 scores, had another 30 on the ground. Again, that's what we love about Kyler Murray and other running quarterbacks. 6 of his 7 games this year, he's hit at least 20 yards on the ground. 3 touchdowns on the ground as well. A Seattle defense that is, kind of been, I think, Geno's been a little up and down, but you look at why is this Seahawks team not lived up to what they wanted to be?
They made Najee Harris look like Jim Brown. That's a start.
Yeah, this Seattle defense is not doing it. Outside of the top 20 in DVOA against the run and the pass. And then on the other hand, if you want to go a little bit cheaper but not drop all the way down to that Tyrod, Mullins, Sam Darnold, Carson Wentz era, group, then yeah, I think Geno is also a reasonable play because, I mean, he's probably safe based on where they are for not getting replaced next season. But, making the playoffs goes a long way in securing yourself long-term, especially because he might be renegotiating that contract this offseason. So, Seahawks have a lot to play for. Cardinals defense has been generally pretty awful. I mean, even last week, you look at the great win they have over Philadelphia. They gave up 31 points.
Yeah.
So, Kyler Murray at 6,400.
And they dominated time of possession. Is what's insane.
Yeah.
If you look at that game.
I mean, the classic Eagles were this season, where for a long time they were skating by, barely winning some games they probably should have lost. And now they're just finding ways to lose games. Well, Seahawks and Cardinals, both of those games they should have won, found ways to lose in the end, and that's why they're probably going to be the 5 seed. But yeah, Seattle, Arizona, I think this is one of those games that you want to target, especially because neither defense is good. So Kyler at 64, Geno at 61.
All right, the value this week. I know you agreed with the Tyrod Taylor. This is a prime example of why a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around DFS. Because I'm about to suggest Nick Mullins at 5,100 at Detroit as the best play, I think, this week for cash, for sure. And it's Nick freaking Mullins. I mean, it's a guy that just got benched, right? And we saw how awful. What was the kid's name? Hall? The Vikings.
Yeah, Jaron Hall. Which
my God. I mean, he got benched for that guy. Like,
that was a choice. I understand that, it's like Dobbs looks bad, you go to Mullins. Mullins looks bad for a bit, you go to Hall. But I don't really know why they ever thought Jaron Hall, based on anything Jaron Hall's ever done. I know he's a rookie, but I'm talking about even back was BYU.
Yeah.
I don't think there was ever a reason to think this guy was a pro level guy you want to actually play.
I am 100% with you. But despite all that, they're playing the Detroit Lions in a dome, which is another big factor. The Lions have something to play for. We know the Vikings have something to play for. So if the Lions are up, that means the Vikings are just going to keep throwing. But regardless, even if, say, the Lions get down whatever, the Cowboys clinch, whatever happens, we know that the Lions are very good versus the run. They are awful versus the pass. You can throw on this Lions team. CeeDee Lamb reminded us again last week when all they did was we're just going to keep throwing to CeeDee Lamb, and he had 5,000 yards and, 14 catches or whatever it was. Mullins has had back-to-back 20-plus point games that he started and played the entire game. He's 5,100. That's 4 times basically his salary, 2 games in a row, including playing this same opponent. He threw for 400 yards in the first time that they met 2 weeks ago. Jefferson is playing. I actually think it helps Mullins' stats that there's no Hawkinson. There is another Vikings tight end that I like very much this week. But I just think that means even more Jefferson, more Addison. That's more likely that there's more big plays. And at 5,100, I don't think it gets any better than that when Detroit is really good versus the run. Minnesota doesn't really have a great running back anyway. I shouldn't say they really don't. They don't have a great running back anyway. So
I think Ty Chandler is probably the best guy they have.
And if we're lucky, the Lions offense is going to do what they've done all year and score points. And then Mullins is just exactly in the situation he was 2 weeks ago. Chuck. Yep. And you only need 15 to 17 points for this to be a good cash play. We get 20 plus, which is very realistic. He's done it the last 2 weeks. It's a great cash play. Love Nick Mullins. That's the value QB.
Yeah. Like I said, Tyrod is my official play, but I think there's a lot of guys you can look at in this cheap area where, again, Sam Darnold's probably not going to be playing with the full allotment of 49er starters, but Kyle Shanahan's still going to be calling plays for him against a Rams defense that I'm sure will be resting some starters. So I think that's another, Rams, Niners, it's like one of those games where quarterback is probably the only position I am targeting there potentially. Although,
what is the old song, The Battle of Who Could Care Less?
Because I don't know which skill guy, is this a big Shoot, why am I blanking on his name? He's
Puka.
like always on my team. The 49ers backup running back.
Oh, it's no. We talked about this today. I think it's the Jordan Mason game because Elijah Mitchell they need. They know that they need him for the playoffs with CMC.
Yeah, you'd be like, oh, this could be the Mitchell game, but then now it's like now we might need him. Or Demarcus Robinson, maybe like a month ago, we'd be like, oh, this is the Demarcus Robinson game. But now it's like,
right?
Yeah, it's like he's too important probably. But the point is, it's really hard to guess what exactly goes on with the skill guys. But we know they're not playing the starting quarterbacks. Nobody's carrying like 3 or 4 quarterbacks. So the backup quarterbacks will play the entire game, presuming they don't get hurt. So that's why I do think there's potential value in a Darnold more than I think a Wentz, just because I don't know. I've seen it's like Sam Darnold. It's like you disappear for a while, you get away from the Jets, and I'm like, maybe he'll be okay with Kyle Shanahan. Whereas Carson Wentz, I'm like, I don't know. We've seen it a million times. He's just bad. But yeah, I think overall though, if I'm going super cheap, I think you got it right. I think it's Tyrod. I think it's Mullins. Those are the two that I'm looking for. Again, we've seen Tyrod do it. We've seen Mullins do it, and Mullins also has Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson.
Well, no Hawkinson, but
oh, that's right.
He's on IR.
But yeah, Justin Jefferson, kind of. As long as you have him, the rest is gravy.
Exactly. The running backs, the median. Let's start exactly like we can literally. If this was a show that we could go back and I guess we could, but I'm just too lazy to do it. Click what I said about Zamir White 3 weeks ago and what I said about Zamir White last week. I would say it again this week. He's 6K versus Denver. It's the exact same situation. I do not believe Josh Jacobs will play. You remember I said that last week. I said he's not going to play. Like, he's just not. There's no way. He's been a non-participant, whatever the hell that means, now for 2 weeks. And Coach has already said that he'll be a game time decision, which is, by the way, exactly what he said last week during the middle of the week. And Zamir White has been really good. I mean, he scored 15.6 points or more in all 3 of his full starts. He's averaging, again, volume is king. Thank you, Dave Eddy. 22.5 touches per in those games. And oh, by the way, Denver's 31st versus running backs on DK. And we might have saw last week that, as crazy as it sounds, the Denver offense might have been better with Russell Wilson than they are with Jared Stidham, as they scored 16 points versus a really bad Chargers defense. All that means is that the game's going to be close. We know what the Raiders do. Like, they've been doing this since Pierce has become the coach. They want to ugly you it up. They want to make the game shorten out, and they want to run the damn ball. And Zamir White has been the guy getting a lot of those carries, and this week he's getting it against the second best team on DraftKings that you can get a bunch of carries against. I love him at 6K. I am not at all concerned that Jacobs is going to play. I see zero chance. And I think White's going to have another big game, kind of similar to the Kansas City one.
Yeah, I love it. He's a great example of sometimes the obvious play is the right play. Just don't overthink things. If a guy is in a great situation, he has talent, and even if the price point means everyone else is going to be on it, I mean, 3 straight weeks where he's easily paid for his salary. I'm going to go for another guy right in that same price range, 6,100. James Conner. Again, I'm targeting this Seahawks-Cardinals game. James Conner on a tear to finish the season.
Yes, he is.
Guy started off the year 3 straight double-digit weeks. Then from weeks 4 through 12, granted there's some injuries in there. He only plays 5 games. He has 0 double-digit games. Then I don't know. Lo and behold, it's December. Kyler Murray's back, feeling a little bit better. 25, 17, 22, and 29 against the Philadelphia Eagles last week. 200-yard rushing games in his last 4. 100 yards total offense in 3 of the last 4. A low total of 89 yards and 1 touchdown in a single game over that span. And again, that's against Steelers defense. Still very solid. San Francisco, one of the best defenses in the league. The Bears, over the last month or two, one of the best defenses in the league. And then, obviously, again, the Eagles' cratering defense, where I believe I saw like EPA and success rate over the last 4 weeks. They're like 30th and 31st. So they are falling apart. which again is why we love Tyrod again. But Seattle, not a defense that I'm worried about against running backs. Again, one of the absolute worst. 30th, which again, Zamir White gets the 31st one in Denver. Seattle, 103 yards per game, purely on the ground. 1.12 touchdowns purely on the ground. Only the Panthers are giving up more rushing touchdowns than the Seattle Seahawks. So again, I just think also 3 of their last 5 games, at least 120 yards given up. So this is a defense that can't stop the run. James Conner, probably for like the 4th straight year, just won a bunch of people a fantasy championship.
So true.
Because he's the guy you never are excited about, and most of this year you were probably angry he was on your team, and then he won you a fantasy championship. So fantasy championships might be over, but that doesn't mean he can't win us some money one last time this week.
Love it. My value, not really that much cheaper than Zamir White, but Khalil Herbert, Chicago Bears, 5,700. This season, Joe, when he has been the featured back for the Chicago Bears, he scored 20 points in every game. Every single one. And the last 2 weeks, 38 rush attempts, 5 targets, 3 catches, 250 all-purpose yards, touchdown in both, over 100 rushing yards in each game, 22.1 points 2 weeks ago, 23.9 this last week. And Green Bay, not a great defense. Like, don't let the Vikings with Hall confuse you. What do you always talk about, right? You can run on Green Bay. It's always been the case.
It's a given.
I think that, again, Chicago wanting to win. I like Fields this week, but I think they run it, and they found something with this Herbert-Fields combo. If you look, both of them are running the ball with ease these last 2 games. I love the matchup. Again, because it's on the road in Green Bay, I think they lean on it a little bit more. And I think he's a real value at 5,700. I'd be shocked if he doesn't get 12 to 15 points because he normally is really involved in the passing game. He actually has not been that involved in it the last 2 weeks. I think that could change this week against a Green Bay team that gives up a lot of receptions to running backs.
I love that play. Khalil Herbert, a guy that I think both of us quite like. And it's just the consistency and the opportunities in Chicago have not always been there this season. But, like you said, when those opportunities have arisen, he has produced. I'm going to roll the dice on the guy you mentioned earlier, Jordan Mason.
I like
4,600. I mean, again, I just think I'm sure. I imagine Elijah Mitchell will probably start this game. He will get a few carries. Elijah Mitchell is just not a guy who has a history of being durable. And so you also have McCaffrey, who got hurt a little bit at the end of last week. I don't see Kyle Shanahan wanting to risk this, even though they obviously
the dumbest thing ever. It really would.
They do. Obviously, they have the bye week, which is why I think you'll probably see a lot of the starters play a series or two, just to keep them fresh. But by the second quarter, and especially the second half, I don't see any of the starters out there, and I don't see Elijah Mitchell out there, which means it's Jordan Mason time, and it's a Kyle Shanahan. It's what we always say. If you know who's going to get the ball in a Kyle Shanahan offense, because that's always been the danger previous.
McVay, McDaniels, all those guys, right? Like whoever the back is.
If you know who it is, that guy will produce because these guys are the best there are at scheming up run game. Again, what's happened with Miami? Mike McDaniel comes from the Shanahan offense. Doesn't matter. Obviously, A-Chain is the most explosive, and then Mostert. But it's it could be anyone. They will find a way. Offensive line versus defensive line. 7th biggest advantage per PFF. 25% San Francisco over the Rams. Who, again, how much Aaron Donald do we see in this game? How much of the Rams starting defense is going to be around? So I just think for guys with reasonable talent, who will still have elite play calling behind them, I think there's opportunities here. And under 5,000 to potentially get the guy who I'm guessing will lead the San Francisco backfield in touches this week. That's too much for me to pass up.
I love that play. I didn't have the balls to do it, but I can promise you I'll have the balls to put them in a few lineups. The wide receivers. I don't feel great about this. I'll go ahead and tell you. But volume is king. Dave Eddy says it all the time. One of the best lessons I've got here is something that Dave Eddy has just like every time we talk about DFS, he talks about volume because it's all it is. I mean, it's opportunities, right? How many opportunities does a guy get? Garrett Wilson at 5,900 versus New England. Like, yeah, there's some risk. I get it. But God, the dude's volume is absurd. His last 10 games, 10 or more targets, 7 of 10. Averaging almost 11 targets per during that 10-game stretch, 10.8. And oh, by the way, he's averaging over 6 receptions per game in that span as well. The QB play is obviously concerning. Don't get me wrong, but he gets so many targets and he has such a high floor too. I feel like at this price, there's a good chance he's going to score like 9 to 15 points. He does that every week. But if he gets 100 yards, if he scores a touchdown, I think this could be a really boom play. It's one of those I like both the floor of it and I like its potential upside.
Yeah, I mean, Garrett Wilson, probably one of the more disappointing guys this season through no fault of his own. He can go off, and he's under 6,000, and that's always going to intrigue me when a guy that talented is in that price range. I'm going to go with another guy who's been, very, very on and off this season. Not what you were hoping for if you drafted him, although if you got him in the right weeks in DFS, this is a guy who has 5 weeks of over 20 points.
DK?
It's Calvin Ridley at 6,500 against the Tennessee Titans. Which, I mean, if DK is 7,200, otherwise, yeah, DK would probably be the guy I was talking about right now. But again, team that has something to play for. They want to win the division. They have to win this game to win the division. You got a Tennessee defense. Again, traditionally not good against the pass. Their starting corners are both hurt. They're 25th against wide receivers this season. They are even worse on the perimeter, second most on the season to the perimeter, which Calvin Ridley, 80% of the time, he is on the outside. And then also, again, Tennessee defense is bad. What happened the last time he faced Tennessee? 7 receptions on 9 targets, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was his best game of the season. He scored 34 points. Obviously not going to guarantee 34 points again. But again, must-win game, great matchup. I think we're getting 20 plus. So sign me up for Calvin Ridley at 6,500.
I like that. Are we underrating T. Law?
That's a good question.
Because he's very. I mean, I know he's banged up, but I mean, I think he's like what 6,400, 6,300.
He's up at 68, which
okay, 68. Okay, it's a little closer than the 7. I thought he was more in the lower 6Ks.
I was gonna say if he was down there in the Murray Geno Smith range, then I might be like, oh, did I make a mistake? But
I'm with you
because he's banged up, and I think that's gonna like limit the potential rushing upside. Although last time we saw him play against Tampa Bay, he ran for 29 yards. But yeah, just because he's banged up, I'd rather go with those guys who are a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, I agree. All right, the value, my guy, or one of them, Greg Dortch, Arizona Cardinals.
Yes.
Nate Markham on the Fantasy and Frame Sunday morning show was kind of making fun of me as I kept bringing up Greg Dortch last week.
Dortch forever, man.
He's just like when Marquise Brown does not play and Kyler Murray is starting, he is going to score double-digit points, basically automatically. He scored almost 12 points in 4 of his last 6 games on DK, but most importantly, the last 2 games without Marquise Brown, who's on IR, and with Kyler Murray at QB, who will start this week. 12 targets, 9 receptions, 127 yards, a touchdown, 27.7 points on DK those 2 weeks, at least 12.5 in each. And Seattle, to your point, not a good defense. The only concern I have about Dortch, McBride, because the Cardinals receivers are very appealing to me this week is obviously the big James Conner game. Does Arizona just literally copy the blueprint of what Pittsburgh did last week and just say, we're just going to run it down your throat, try to stop us. But either way, Dortch at 4,600, I think he's in that price range where he's a very good value. And another point too, Demarcus Robinson's right at this, range, which I was on him last week. Again, he had another good week, but I think your point at the beginning was a big thing. I know Dortch is going to play the entire game, and I know that, they're not going to potentially rest him depending on what's going on in other games. And again, that's why this week it's really important to kind of know what are the potential scenarios for these guys. And if it's, they're going to play pretty much no matter what, like what is the benefit of the Cardinals sitting Greg Dortch? I like it, right?
Absolutely. Now, I really like the Cardinals plays this week with Dortch and Michael Wilson. I'm just both super affordable. Again, I love the Kyler Murray play. So I say fire either of those guys up and feel good. I'm going to go kind of, I guess, expensive, I suppose, for the bargain. But I think Jordan Addison, who has been mostly quiet outside of the huge Cincinnati game last month or so, I think he has a big game to finish off his rookie season, 5,300 against the Lions. I liked him a couple weeks ago. I don't remember if he was one of my plays that week, but I put him in my fantasy lineup and lost in the playoffs. Not entirely his fault. My whole team kind of cratered collectively. But only one catch on 4 targets for 2 yards against Detroit. But he twisted his ankle pretty early on in that game and missed the entire second half. Otherwise, this is a plus. Again, this is a plus matchup against the Detroit Lions. 28th on the year against wide receivers on the whole per FTN Fantasy. They are 26th, the Lions, in yards given up to number 2 wide receivers. Got Hawkinson out. We're hoping the Lions are playing their starters. I mean, I think Dan Campbell's the type where if there's any, they're an early game, right?
Yeah.
Right, so they will not know the potential result of, they can hold out hope that Washington will pull off that
They're
Dallas
going to be angry
upset.
after. I have a feeling the Lions are going to try to punch the Vikings in the throat, which is good for all these Vikings plays.
Right, that's what we want because, we want maximum Nick Mullins airing it out. And, the Dallas-Washington game is in the afternoon, so they will have to play their game without knowing whether the miracle can happen, which, just a quick tangent, the person who has the most to play for out of anyone this week is Sam Howell. Because I believe they announced today that he is getting the start one last time. If he were to pull off an epic upset of the Dallas Cowboys to rob them of the division, probably, or at least presumably of the 2 seed. Not only would that be great and win over a bunch of Washington fans that you beat Dallas, next year he's probably throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr. If they lose the game, they are almost certainly drafting Caleb Williams or Drake May. So he will either be backing up one of those guys next year or he'll be throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr. So Godspeed, Sam Howell. But back to Jordan Addison, I just think we're set up for, as you mentioned earlier, Nick Mullins airing it out. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is always the guy you most want to be pairing with any quarterback for the Vikings. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Jordan Addison, who, again, a guy who's got 9 touchdown passes this season, who's had multiple 30-point games. So
he would have had a monster year had Cousins stayed healthy, especially with Jefferson being out all those games. Like Vikings, I feel very good about their receivers moving forward.
The Vikings, talk about a what-if team this year.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
They start off losing a bunch of close games that they easily could have won, which they were always winning last year. And I actually think when Cousins went down, I think this was clearly, it wasn't clear based on the standings, but just watching the team, better team than they were last year.
Yeah.
And Addison, I think, was a big part of that because it's just having 3 legit weapons in the pass game really opened things up. Cousins was playing the best he ever had. So huge bummer for Vikings fans, but I think we can go out with some fireworks here, Vikings.
And again, they also have a chance to win and get in. So they're also playing for it in that factor. And again, the Lions are very, very good versus the run. All right, tight ends. Obviously, I've been giving Trey McBride every week. I'm not going to officially give Trey McBride this week, but play Trey McBride. He's a number one receiver for 6K. So, but there's two plays I really like that are considerably cheaper. Darren Waller is my median, 4,700 versus Philly. Last week with Taylor, 6 targets, 5 catches, 51 yards. Nothing, too special, but 10.1 points. Again, for a tight end most weeks, you get 10 points, you're probably going to finish top 10 at the position. He's 4,700. Philly, real bad versus tight ends. They're 27th. Waller, kind of like McBride, is the de facto number one wide receiver for this Giants offense. Like if you look, Slayton has been incredible. All those guys are maybe, I guess you could say target-wise, maybe Wan'Dale Robinson, but he's basically the guy that's going to consistently get the most looks. And he's got an unbelievable matchup. He's only 4,700. This is, I don't really feel comfortable, I don't think, in cash double stacking Tyrod with Waller and Slayton, but I will definitely be, having lineups with Taylor and either Waller or Slayton being basically the pass catcher I stack them with.
Yeah, I mean, he has 21 targets over the 3 games that Tyrod has played the entirety of, which... And it's not like he had 11-1 and then 3, and then no, it's like it's at least 6 in all 3 games, at least 5 receptions in all 3 games. So yeah, I'm with you. I really like the Waller play at 4,700 because again, it's not the most high-powered offense, clearly, but again, you're playing a team that's been over the last month bottom 2, bottom 3 defense in the NFL, and Giants, like you said. Damn the draft position. These guys don't care about that. They want to fucking beat the Eagles. Waller wants to, frustrating season for him, I'm sure, with all the injuries. He wants to go out on a high note. So yeah, I'm co-signing with you on Waller here.
All right. The value then for me is a guy that honestly, I'm not going to lie, I didn't know who the hell this dude was until I started looking at the research this week. It's Johnny Munt for the Minnesota Vikings. 3K.
Okay, I've never even heard that name before.
I hadn't either. I had to look up. I assumed he was a rookie because of how many more snaps he's been playing since Hawkins' case. He's 29 years old. But we know Hawkinson is done for the year, right? He's on IR. The Vikings are a team that they throw to the tight end a lot. Munt saw 7 targets last week. Caught 4 passes for 37 yards and a touchdown versus Green Bay. The important numbers you need to know. He played 41 of the 52 snaps. That's important. What's even more important, he ran a route on 32 of those 41 plays. The other tight end, Josh Oliver, 24 snaps, only ran 8 routes. Again, I think Minnesota is going to be chucking it. I do like the double stack of Mullins, Munt. And if you want to go Addison, you can. I would go with Jefferson because you're saving so much money at the QB and tight end position. Lions, I mean, they're okay. They're 18th versus tight ends. Nothing to write home about. But I just think, 7 targets on 32 routes is pretty doggone good. And that was his first action. And Mullins, remember, targeted Hawkinson a lot in the games that he played. I really do like Johnny Munt at 3K.
Johnny Munt. All right.
Never
you have the history of throwing out the tight end where I'm like, who is that? Or that guy's still in the league, and then the guy scores 2 touchdowns. So Johnny Munt is officially going into some of my lineups this week. I'm going to go with a guy that has been very quietly, consistently producing, and that's Tucker Kraft for the Green Bay Packers at 3,700. I did not realize until doing research this week, he has 4 straight double-digit games on DK.
This was the Zay Flowers last week. And again, he went all force. Remember, he had scored 20 points in 3 straight, and I had no idea.
Yeah, it's just sometimes you get overshadowed by Lamar Jackson being the MVP. Or in Tucker Kraft's case, it's been kind of the bummer that, Luke Musgrave keeps getting hurt. Love that guy. I think he's got so much talent. And then, the rotating cast of which receiver for Green Bay is going off in any given week. And then, Tucker Kraft is just knocking out 4 receptions at least in 4 straight weeks, 6 targets in 3 straight weeks. Like I said, again, I love the tight ends who were getting consistent production of at least, that 4 or 5 week area. And it's without just, he caught touchdowns in 3 or 4 weeks, and that's why he scored 10 points. He has 1 touchdown over the last month and 4 straight double-digit games. Bears, not one of the worst defenses against tight ends, but 26th, I think. I've seen other areas, total yardage, I believe they're right around that 20 mark. So that 26 is actually they're probably not quite that bad, or at least that recently as the Bears defense has played better. They have a pretty solid linebacking core, but I don't know. I think the way the Green Bay defense is played, the way all my Green Bay fans are just screaming to fire the defensive coordinator, I think the Bears are going to put up some points in this game. You alluded to Khalil Herbert earlier. I think this is going to be another good Justin Fields, DJ Moore game, even with Jair Alexander coming back from suspension for Green Bay. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. And if it's a high-scoring game and Jordan Love's going to have to drop back a decent amount, I don't see any reason to think Tucker Kraft doesn't see another 6 targets, another 4 receptions, and when we get a touchdown, 20 points is in range. So Tucker Kraft, 3,700.
Yeah, was it Dave or was it Chris that gave his name when we did the Thanksgiving show? And that was literally the first time I'd ever heard of him. He was 2,500 and he scored a touchdown like 5 minutes into the game. And I was like, these guys are good.
Right.
Completely agree, though. Love the Kraft play. All right, flex. Rarely do this, but I'm going to give another tight end for the median. Dallas Goedert,
Ooh.
Philadelphia Eagles, 5,100 at the Giants. Since his return 4 weeks ago, 28 targets. So obviously that's 7 per, but at least 6 targets the last 3 games. 20 receptions, 4 or more in each game. 178 yards. The last 2, 118 of that 178 yards. Back-to-back games of 14-plus points on DK. This offense, not a lot of things going right. They need to get Dallas Goedert going. I think they know that. That's kind of why they've been throwing more to him. They know that there's got to be other disparity than A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. You made the point. You got to have those 3 guys that you can throw it to. It's so important to kind of open everything up. I like Goddard, especially, again, they're playing, they're still playing for stuff. And I think they need to get him right. The Giants, they're okay versus tight ends, nothing to write home about. And I just feel like that obviously A.J. Brown's getting a lot of attention. Devontae Smith gets a lot of attention. It seems like teams are just kind of letting Goddard do whatever. Again, 118 yards his last 2 games, 9 receptions. I think 15 points is probably about, his floor this week. I think he scores.
I like that one. I mean, yeah, Dallas Goedert, that has to be one of the more frustrating tight ends if you drafted him this season.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's good enough. And it's just this offense, for whatever the reason is, it's, more film on Jalen Hurts and his limitations throwing over the middle. Obviously, losing Shane Steichen.
I was going to say that's
one of the best play callers in the league. You can see it by the fact that the Colts, no matter who's been at quarterback this year, have continued to be a functional offense. So yeah, that's a frustrating one. Hopefully, I'm kind of hoping the Giants lose because I want the highest draft pick possible.
Course, yeah.
So my ideal game is very similar to the one we played 2 weeks ago, where it's like, it's back and forth, it's close, and we lose 31-27, and all of our plays go off.
Amen to that.
Speaking of that game, listen, if I felt fully confident in Philly sticking with the starters the whole way, I think DeAndre Swift would be a play at 6,800, but I think this is Saquon Barkley's last game as a Giant. I don't know that for sure. Anything could potentially happen still there, but my general vibe is last year it was like, we've got to keep this team together. We just had the best season we've had in 11 years. And I think now it's like, all right, that was kind of a mistake. It's going to be turn the page time. And if there's one thing you can always say as a Giants fan, it's you never doubted Saquon Barkley, his want to win, his drive to be out on the field, even if he's been banged up. He's only had one win over the Eagles in his career. There were two in the time span he's been on the team, but one of those was when he was on injured reserve. So he only has one win in his career over the Eagles. The very first game he ever played against the Eagles is honestly one of the most impressive games he ever had. He had 229 total yards on 22 touches. I don't know if anything like that's going to happen again, but week 16, 23 carries, 80 yards and a score, added 3 receptions, gave us 19.4 points at pretty much the same price point, 6,800 versus 69 now. I think Saquon's going to want to go out with a bang at home against the Eagles. I'm worried that the Giants are actually going to win this game. So, yeah, I'm gonna roll with another Giant in Saquon and say, listen, I think James Conner, I like that play more at $800 cheaper, but there's a part of me that's romantic and thinks that Saquon gives us like a 25-point game to close out his career with the Giants against the Eagles.
Again, James Conner, similar skill back. I mean, I think Barkley's obviously higher upside, but Conner, again, somebody that's both got speed and power, just torched this defense. So,
bottom 2 defense in success rate and EPA per play since week 13.
And that's why my value, yet another New York Giant, I got to go with him. I mean, this guy won me 100%. A ton of money
100%.
The last 3 weeks. It's been just unbelievable. Or excuse me, the last 2 weeks, the Christmas game, and then obviously last week's slate. Darius Slayton, he's only 4K versus Philly. His last 2 weeks, 9 targets, 7 receptions, 196 yards, 2 scores. But in 6 quarters with Tyrod Taylor, 5 receptions, 181 yards, and 2 scores. Again, last week, I had actually a pretty big cash and a big entry despite having CMC in that lineup. And it was because, thank God, I ran with the stack of Tyrod Taylor and Darius Slayton. And by doing that was they would put Kyron Williams in there. And the next thing you know, you're still cashing. Philly's dead last versus wide receivers on DK. Again, Taylor played 1 half and Slayton caught a 75-yard touchdown pass. It's obviously risky, but at 4K, if he gets 8 to 10 points, it's not going to kill you, which I do think Slayton, worst case, would get that. But I think it's, again, highly likely he has 70, 80 yards or more. And if Tyrod Taylor plays the way he has most of the games that he's played this season, good chance he scores a touchdown. I think Slayton's a great value. I'm actually really surprised they did not bump him up any more than they did.
I'm surprised as well, considering, I think we've seen that there's a very real connection there. So I like that one. I will also do, once again, a Giant. I'll roll with Wan'Dale Robinson, 4,200 against the Eagles. There have been 3 games this season where Wan'Dale Robinson has had 6 receptions. There have been 2 games where he has had 8 or more targets. Both games with the 8 or more targets, and 2 of the 3 games with 6 receptions were with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, including last week, 6 for 9, 55 yards, plus a 24-yard run for a touchdown against the LA Rams. And Rams, not a great defense that's playing better than the Eagles right now. The Eagles just gave up 25 to the Giants, and the Giants were knocking on the door at the very end of that game. Got down to the I think it was like the 25-yard line and ran out of time. So, also 2 back-to-back games where the Giants have scored 25 points with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback. It's pretty clear that at least, so long as Andrew Thomas and Saquon are out there, Tyrod gives this team a chance to score real points. Provided the Eagles are trying, which I think they will be for at least most of this game, unless that Washington-Dallas game really gets out of hand, they should be able to put up plenty of points, which should keep this offense in a relatively pass-heavy scenario. And, Wan'Dale he's the target king. Slayton's the deep ball. It's also like he dropped like a 35-yard pass last week. That pissed me off because he was one of my plays. And then he probably would have had, a double-digit game as well. But Wan'Dale, not so much the deep ball guy, but the guy who's going to give us those PPR points. And again, they like to throw him into the run game every once in a while. He has some explosion there. 60 yards on 3 carries over the last month in the run game. And yeah, again, 24 last week, 32 long on the other one. So again, it's not like 158-yard run. Like they scheme it up nice with Wandale. So yeah, I think if you just guess the right Giant, you're going to be in good shape. Or Giants, because yeah, we've named 4 different guys besides Tyrod, and they're all these combos are cheap. Even the Saquon one, you don't really need to pair with anyone. But if you're doing Wandale Waller, Tyrod Waller, Tyrod Wandale, Tyrod Slayton, or throwing the even bigger dart at the board with Tyrod Hyatt, they're all incredibly cheap.
Yeah, all under 10K.
I will be surprised if one of those combos does not hit big.
Yeah. Again, God, it's crazy how far the Eagles
they had the record for sacks last season, and now we're like, this is atrocious.
With the Giants, with Tyrod Taylor, we're like, we're all in.
They're going to light them up, which is also what happens, though, when you make Matt Patricia your defensive coordinator. I know there were issues before then, but I don't think that's ever the answer.
That is chef's kiss. All right, the defenses real quick. Then we get out of here because I know that you were going to the Arizona game. Go Cats.
That's right. Bounce back.
All right, so again, we can go ahead and just jump down to 3,000 and below because if you watch the show, we don't pay attention to any of that stuff. The Bears at 2,900, very interesting to me. This Bears defense has been real frisky lately. They have now scored double digits in 4 of their last 5, 9 points or more in 5 of their last 6. Arizona, the only team that they kind of struggled with. I know Green Bay's offenses look pretty good, but I like them. The Chargers, I know that sounds crazy. Are the Chiefs going to play their guys? Who knows? They have nothing to play for. If you hear,
I believe Mahomes he's been ruled out, right?
Okay, well then there you go. Then yeah, absolutely you should be considering the Chargers versus backups. And then the other team that I have to just mention is the Carolina Panthers versus the Bucks after what we saw last week. I don't know how you can't. I don't know what happened, but the Bucks offense just looked broke. I really like Rachaad White this week. I know he was too expensive for us to talk about. Yeah. I think that's going to be Tampa's game plan is, look, Carolina's really bad versus the run. Let's just run it a lot with Rachaad White. Hopefully win the division and get out of here, but I don't hate that matchup. And again, with the 49ers having Sam Darnold, Jordan Mason, all that stuff, the Rams should absolutely be in your consideration too. The issue with the Rams is I have no idea if they want to win. At least with the Panthers, I know they want to win, right? They don't care. They're not getting their first pick anyway. So
no.
What defenses are you looking at?
I think pretty similar for the most part. I do think the interesting thing is, depending on just vibes, you can really throw a lot of different darts because you could look at the Broncos defense and we like Zamir White, but I don't think it's not like we like Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah, you're not scared of him.
So I think you can look at a Broncos defense that for the most part has played much better. Post that Miami game, they've had, I believe, 3-4 double-digit games on DK. So, yeah, you got them against Aiden O'Connell. I think that's a very interesting one at 2,800. Like you said, the Chargers defense against Kansas City backups. You can, again, I don't like ever betting against the Kyle Shanahan offense, but if you want to just be like, Sam Darnold sucked, he always sucked, he will always and forever suck, then hey, roll the dice on the Rams. But I do think I'm kind of with you on, if you're going super cheap, you're going below that 2,800 range, which is where the Chargers and Broncos are at, and below the Bears. So yeah, by weighted DVOA, which lowers the value of anything more than 8 weeks out. So really the second half of the season, 5th best defense in weighted DVOA. So again, Bears playing awesome. Jordan Love is also playing well. So that game could go either way. But yeah, if there's just a weird thing that would happen, it wouldn't shock me. Especially, like you said, after what we saw last week. I do think, in our weekly picks pool that we're both in, I think I put Tampa Bay down for 14 points just because who has more to gain,
right? And
who's playing a worse team. But you're telling me that an Ejiro Evero defense foils Baker Mayfield to keep him out of the playoffs? That would not shock me. So if you're going super cheap, I'm with you. Again, I think the Cardinals Seahawks turns out to be a shootout. I don't like the Cardinals defense. Same thing with Giants, Eagles. I guess if the backups come in, maybe there's some value there. But in general, Giants did have a pick 6 in the last game that they played. But unless Dallas Goedert slips at the right moment again, don't like the Giants defense. And then for like the third straight week in a row, I love going cheap on defense. Don't go with the Commanders. Just don't do it. There's no reason to. Dallas has plenty to play for. They're going to want to win this game. The last time they played Dallas, they had -4 points. Over the last 5 weeks, they have a combined 2 points as a defense. Do not play the Washington Commanders. Whatever you do, find that extra at least $100 or $200 to spend on someone else. But yeah, the defenses I really like, I think, are the Broncos, Chargers, Bears. I like that triumvirate right under the 3,000 mark.
Yeah, and again, pay attention all the way up.
Yes.
To the game start, because it's
double check everything Sunday morning.
You got to know. And that's why you should check out the Fantasy Six Pack Sunday morning show. I'm sure they'll have all that great information.
Solved.
Well, that's it. We got through week 18. Again, we will be here, wild card, divisional, conference, Super Bowl. You can't get rid of us that quickly. I saw our boy JJ in one of our chats go, week 18 DFS, you guys are degenerates. It's like, dude, this is prime winning time. Like, dude, come on. Like, I love this time of year. This is where you really get a leg up.
Absolutely.
Be sure to check out all the great stuff at Fantasy Six Pack. I'll have a DFS Stacks article up sometime tomorrow. Last week, my game stack, Kyron Williams,
you were on it last week.
DeMarcus Robinson, Tyrod Taylor, Darius Slayton. It was a big one. I believe they combined for just under 100 points. They were less than 50% of your DraftKings and FanDuel salary. I was on one last week. Hopefully, we will continue that this week. Joe, I hope you have a great time at the Arizona Wildcats game. I'm glad that you are back and out in the wild again, now that you're not testing positive for Rona. And Happy New Year, buddy, again.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
But for Keith and Joe, this is the F6P NFL DFS Kickoff Show. We'll see you guys soon.